everybody and welcome to Books with Ike. My name is Isaac and today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up. So I read 7 books in September and I've already filmed my wrap-up, so I'm just going to hand this video over to past Isaac. The first book I read in September was The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is the second book in the Eldest Curses series, which is part of the Shadowhunter Chronicles, which is a series about half-angelic demon-hunting warriors called Shadowhunters. And this book follows Magnus Bane and Alec Lightwood, who are some of the main characters of the original Shadowhunter series, The Mortal Instruments, in between the various gaps in the series. This one takes place in between Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy and Lady Midnight, and it's set in Shanghai, which is fun. And I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, but that might be a bit too generous, because the thing about this book is it really has a tone problem. Like, the writing never matches the tone of the events of the book. When the scene is supposed to be sad, the writing isn't sad. When the scene is supposed to be dark, the writing isn't dark. It's just written in such a clinical way. It's, like, deliberately a very funny tone throughout, and it just doesn't work. And I don't know if that's just Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu's writing not meshing. I don't know if it's me growing out of Cassandra Clare. I really hope it's not, but I had issues with her last book as well. But apart from the writing style, everything about this book is great. The plot is incredible, the character development is great, the world building is some of the most interesting in the entire Shadowhunter Chronicles, and I don't understand a lot of it. I guess it's just because it's set in Shanghai, and it deals with a lot of Chinese mythology and things, and, like, the Chinese downworld is so different to the American downworld and the English downworld. It feels completely different. I was going to give this 4 stars, but I gave it an extra 0.5 for the climax, which is incredibly well done, and answers a problem I've had with a lot of other Shadowhunter Chronicles books since City of Glass. Because there's a plot point in City of Glass which should be incredibly significant, but never comes up again, except in this book. And you probably know what I mean by that if you're a fan of the series. I can't elaborate, because it would spoil City of Glass. And the Eldest Curses series is marketed as a side series that you don't necessarily need to read to understand the main series. This is a lie, because the epilogue of this book is one of the most significant events in the entire Shadowhunter Chronicles, and is clearly setting up the Wicked Powers, which is going to be the final Shadowhunter series. So if you haven't read these books because you think they're not important, they are. A lot. And the marketing is bad. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book except for the writing issue, and I can't wait for the Black Volume of the Dead, or the Wicked Powers. Oh, and you also get a lot of great development for characters that aren't Alec and Magnus in this, especially Simon, and the antagonist is incredible. So yeah, 4.5 stars. The next book I read in September was Beautiful Creatures by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. The first book in the Beautiful Creatures series, or the Castor Chronicles, or whatever you want to call it. This is about a boy called Ethan Waite, who is growing up in a small southern town, who has dreams about a girl that he's never met before, and then the girl turns up in his hometown. And so this is one of the books that I've had for ages that I picked out via random number generator, and it was one I was dreading reading because I'd heard such bad things about it. So I was pleasantly surprised by the beginning, because the beginning is great. The writing style is so incredibly atmospheric to begin with. It really sucks you in, it's really well done. But my relief did not last, because a solid 100 pages of this book is absolute filler that does not need to be there. It is incredibly repetitive and boring. The characters are paper thin, the romance is bland, the antagonists are awful, They are literally pure evil, and thus have no personality or motivation besides being evil. The plot is built on misunderstandings, the characters are assholes who keep secrets from people for no reason. A lot of elements of the plot are left extremely unclear, and some of the most important things in this book, in my opinion, are not adequately addressed. The portrayal of teenagers is shit. Like, the main characters are portrayed as the only teenagers capable of independent thought in their entire school, and everyone else just follows the popular crowd. And I don't know what kind of schools Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll went to, but that's not how it works. The popular crowd doesn't have nearly the amount of power that's portrayed in here. The status quo is not nearly as important as portrayed in here. There are some interesting themes in here about Southern pride and revisionist history and small-town insularity, but they're not, like, properly explained at all. The side characters are pretty interesting, but not the main characters, and there is some interesting world-building at parts, but for the most part the magic system is totally incomprehensible, and the most tone-deaf reference in history happens in this book when the authors compare how the basketball team treats dating unpopular girls to Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Which, no. Just no. No. So yeah, overall, it was a fairly mixed bag. I gave it 2.75 out of 5 stars, and I will continue with the series, at least until the second book. Depends how that one goes, if I will finish it. Yeah, it's not great. It's not even good. It's just a meh. This is a meh book. It could be good if it took out like 100 pages, or maybe 200, I don't know, and avoided a lot of the repetitive plot. But as it is, it's nothing special, and I wouldn't recommend reading it, to be honest. The next book I read in September was Shadowhunters Downwelders, edited by Cassandra Clare, and this is an essay collection about the Mortal Instruments series. And I said in my All My Unread Books video that I would get round to this eventually, because it was something I didn't particularly care about. So why did I read this? I don't remember why I read this. I think I just picked it up on a whim, maybe? I wasn't waiting for a new book to arrive, I know that. Wait, maybe I was. I probably started reading it before The Lost Book of the White. That would make sense. That's probably it. So anyway, yeah, this was also a very meh book. There are some interesting essays in here, but not many. The first one, Unhomely Places by Kate Milford, that's a very good one. Sharper Than a Seraph Blade by Diana Peterfreund gave me a new appreciation for Jace, when he's one of the characters from the series I really don't care about, so that was interesting. Simon Lewis' Jewish Vampire Hero by Michelle Hodkin gives some very interesting information on Judaism that I wasn't aware of. And The Importance of Being Malik by Sarah Ryan taught me some stuff about queer history that I didn't know. So that was quite interesting. I'll link my Goodreads review in the description. I didn't have anything to say on every essay in here, but I think I had more to say than what I've just said. I gave each of the essays their own star rating, but overall this just came to a 3-star and it was very forgettable. I do remember that I didn't give any of the essays 5 stars, so there's that. Then I read The Hanged Man by K.D. Edwards, and this might very well be my favourite book of the year. So this is the second book in the Tarot sequence, which started with The Last Sun, and the Tarot sequence is set in the city of New Atlantis, which is ruled by the Arcana, who are creatures of immense magical power that humans subconsciously named the major arcana of Tarot after. And the first book follows Rune St. John, who is the last remaining heir to the Sun Throne, whose entire family was slaughtered when he was 15. So now Rune has very little wealth and power, and does work as a mercenary. and he is hired to investigate the disappearance of another Arcana heir, Adam St. Nicholas, who is the son of Lady Justice, and at the same time he is tricked into agreeing to safeguard another Arcana heir. And I made a mistake in that I didn't, when I talked about The Last Son, talk about the lack of compelling female characters in it. Because there really is a lack of compelling female characters in the first book, but this book solves that problem immediately. It also does not have the same repetitive structure as the first book, and it also does not have the problem with a weak antagonist that the first book does. Because the antagonist in this, the Hanged Man, is absolutely terrifying and disgusting and hateful and just horrible to read about. And obviously, like, my favourite part of this series is the characters, because the characters are absolutely incredible. The relationship development is great in this, the familial development, the friendship development. This is possibly my favourite found family in all of fiction. It's absolutely incredible. The world building is developed really well. The development to the magic system is also really good, but it's not like the development to the magic system itself, it's the development to how one specific character uses the magic system because of what he has learnt in the first book, which is just so well done. There are even more intriguing mysteries set up for later in the series, and the plot is extremely complex and twisty, and I just adore this book. I absolutely love it. It's so good. Rune, still one of my favourite characters in all of fiction. Same for Brand and Adam, honestly. And I will die for any of the children in this series, and if anything happens to them in the future, then I will scream. And that doesn't just apply to the characters from the first book, that applies to all of the new characters introduced as well. They're just all so amazing. And, like, I don't want to bring in, like, my opinions on the author into my opinions on the book, but I also love K.D. Edwards as a person, because he is so involved with the community, and he puts up novellas for free, and I've spoken to him. He messaged me to thank me for my reviews, which is insane. And that didn't influence my opinion on this book, because he did it after I uploaded my review of this. But he also liked my first review of The Last Son, so that was just surreal. So yeah, this is one of my favourite series of all time now. I adore the characters, I adore the world, I adore the plot, I can't wait to see where it goes, and I will read absolutely anything K.D. Edwards puts out in the future, because his writing is just so good. And also he's great as a person as well, so there's that. Obviously I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, it may very well be my favourite book of the year, but obviously I do have to give content warnings because these books are incredibly dark, and the antagonist of this book specifically is a paedophile, and obviously there's warnings for the sexual abuse and sexual abuse of minors, and there's a lot of drug use, there's animal cruelty. You know what, I'm just going to copy and paste a list of content warnings and put that in the description for this series, because there are really a lot of them. But yeah, if you can handle all of the dark themes, then I could not more highly recommend this series. It is absolutely one of my favourites ever. And then after The Hanged Man, I read The Sunken Mall by K.D. Edwards, which is the novella that takes place in between the first and second books, and I would highly recommend reading it before The Hanged Man. And it's available free online, so there you have no excuse. You can just download it for free. And it was also brilliant. I gave it 4.25 stars. The development to the world building is insanely interesting, and there are some really cool new creatures that are introduced, which are just... they're just so cool. And there is something that's just really adorable in it that I cannot talk to you about because it's such a big spoiler, but it's incredible. It's so cute. It is the cutest fucking thing I've ever read. No, it's not. It might be. You know, whatever. And there is a lot of really great emotional development for Rune in The Sunken Mall, and for Rune's relationship with his love interest, and it's just so good. I just didn't expect so much from such a tiny, free novella. And obviously that should have set my expectations for the other one, but obviously I didn't learn my lesson. And there's a little spoiler for my next wrap-up for you, unless you follow my Goodreads. And after that, I read a webcomic, and I don't normally talk about the webcomics I've read on this channel, because they're just so long and ongoing, and I don't really track when I read them, so it would be difficult. But I do really want to make a video all about webcomics and recommend some, because they deserve more recognition than they get. But that being said, the next book I read in September was Rock and Riot, and I don't quite remember the author's name. I think it's Chelsea Ferrady. If I'm wrong, I'll put it above me somewhere. And the reason I counted that as a book I'd read is because it is a short one-shot comic, or at least the one I read was. I believe that there are more volumes, but I have no idea how to get onto them. Maybe they were only physically published, I don't know. But this was just a cute, I think it's 1950s queer romance story, and it's like a bunch of different romances. There's FF romances and MM romances. There's at least one trans character. There's, I think, a non-binary character, or maybe more than one? Yeah, I think there's like 3 non-binary characters who are all in a gang. It was basically just putting a cute queer story into the 1950s, into this very bigoted time, I guess. And yeah, it was fun, it was cute, but it was ultimately quite forgettable, and yeah, that's it. I don't really have anything more to say. It didn't leave much of a lasting impact on me. I gave it 3 stars. And then the last book I read in September was Weavers by John Walker. And I was really excited to get around to this because John Walker is a friend of mine and this is his debut novel. And I'll leave a link to this book's Amazon page in the description. And I wasn't just excited for it because it was his book. From the way he pitched it to me, it sounded really great and like everything I wanted to read. And so this is set in a world where the dropping of the atomic bombs in Japan started to cause humans to develop magical abilities, and the mages are called weavers because they weave their essence into the elements to manipulate them and control them or whatever. And this follows 3 characters called Vin, Matt and Amber, who are dealing with the societal pressures placed on weavers and also the expectations of their families. And they become involved in a conspiracy that involves Matt's formerly missing sister. And that's really all I can say about it, I think. So I liked this book, I gave it 3.25 stars. It did have some really interesting ideas, such as the exploitation of weavers and weavers' rights. And the characters were interesting and likeable, and for the most part the plot was good. But I did have some problems, and the first of those is that this really needed another round of editing. And I wish I'd beta-read this, because I was given the opportunity to, and I turned it down because of misunderstandings. But I think I would have caught most of the spelling errors and grammatical errors, and there's some tense switching. It doesn't bother me over much, but it was very present. And also there was an issue with the formatting, where if the chapter began with an M, half the right leg of the M would be cut off. But yeah, like I said, that doesn't bother me as much, but it is a problem with the book that you need to be aware of before you read it. And other than that, I didn't really care for the romance. I didn't really buy into it. I didn't think the characters had anything in common besides one philosophy, and that was really the only reason given for them to be together. Like, I enjoyed them as characters individually, but I didn't really care about them together. I think a certain character's power progression was too rushed, and I didn't really understand the main antagonist's motivation for their actions. And as well as that, there was some dark subject matter that felt really out of place compared to the tone of the rest of the book. But yeah, I did enjoy this, and I will still read the sequel, but I didn't love it as much as I hoped I would. By the time this video is uploaded, I should have written a review for this, which I will leave linked in the description. So yeah, that was every book I read in September, plus these ones over here. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you thought about them, so please leave that in the comments below. And also tell me about any books that you've read, not necessarily in September, but just recently. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter or add me as a friend on Goodreads if you feel like it, links to both of those in the description. And I will hopefully have another video up soon. But until then, thank you for watching. I have been Isaac and this has been Books with Ike. Goodbye.